All right, party people, greetings and grace to you. It's your girl here, Tish, with Mind Your Wellbeing, and I'm so excited to present to you this episode, this inaugural episode, this inaugural subject matter expert interview with hormone pharmacist Mr. Steve Goldring. He's the founder of Simple Hormones here on YouTube, and you probably heard of him. If you're not, then this is your introduction to him, and I'm so excited. Okay, one of the things that I'm excited about this interview is that we actually go over my blood work, okay, and over my hormone levels. And so I'm super excited about that. But he is a compounding uh, pharmacist, and he has an education platform here on YouTube, educating women on hormone replacement therapy, as well as he's starting to, incorporating, discussing issues relative to men and their hormones as well. So, in this video, you're going to first hear about Mr. Goldring, who he is, his background in compound pharmacy, all of the things about him, and then we progress on into the interview. I'm going to timestamp, so those that want to get down to the nitty gritty can do so, but I strongly suggest that you watch every single minute, okay, because you don't want to miss it. To give you a quick update on my levels that we will discuss in the video, my estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone were discussed, and the test that was done. The test that we're discussing in the video was done September 25th, 2023, and this test was done March 25th, 2024. So 6 months after. And again, as I stated, I started on the lowest dose and I've kind of progressed up. And in between that time, I've cycled kind of on and off based on how I was feeling. Like, and as you learn from the video, what had me feeling some weird way and why I even reached out to Mr. Goldring here. But to update you, to let you know that how my levels changed in the 6 months that I've done this experimentation. In the video, my testosterone was 13. As of March 26th, it is below that now. Okay, as I'm getting closer and closer to full out menopause, right? To the formal definition of menopause. And June will be the 365 days without a cycle that stamps you as actual menopausal, right? So March, the 25th of September 2023, I was at 13 testosterone. 6 months later, I am outside of range. The range of testosterone is 4 to 50. I'm below 3 right now, okay? Nothing. It says, okay, outside of range for testosterone. Estradiol is up from point to below 5 off of the scale to 7.8, and progesterone is up point 6. I'm sorry, up to point 0.9 from point 0.6, and that is because I've kind of cooled it on the progesterone. And as you listen to the video here, you'll understand why. Because it seems like progesterone in me, I may have to go another route and so on and so forth. But you got to watch the video to understand all of that. But I wanted to update you guys on that. As it relates to progesterone, and you'll hear from him what the optimal levels are, I'm still way off far from that. So I could stand to continue to increase my estradiol levels, but I can't do that until I get my progesterone situation under control. And that's why I've been on it for 6 months, but I haven't seen any huge rise in my levels because I've paused a couple of times because of what seems to be not a great reaction to the progesterone. Okay, so you learn about all that in the video, and there's also links to his course that I've taken, and then if you obviously sign up for the course, you will also be benefiting me as I'm helping him promote that course, and you'll be helping me with an extra stream of income. So it's definitely worth it. And I took the course myself, so I'm not advocating anything that I have not found value in first myself. And then he also has some free resources. For example, you're able to, he can refer you to an optimization specialist possibly in your area, and then obviously what he shares on YouTube. Mr. Goldring, tell us who you are. Tell us about the hormone pharmacist.
So my name's Steve Goldring, and I call myself the hormone pharmacist. Now, there may be lots of other pharmacists who deal with hormones, but I have the domain hormonepharmacist.com. And I've been the hormone pharmacist for a number of years, probably close to 8 to 10 years now. I've been fascinated by hormones and hormone optimization for quite a long time. I've been working with men and women as a compounding pharmacist for a couple of decades now. And I talked with so many men and women over the pharmacy counter about their hormones that eventually I started thinking about really kind of diving into that as as a teacher. I feel like I have a calling as a teacher, and I've had lots of people say that I have some skills and some talents as a teacher. And so I've really chosen to emphasize teaching people about hormones and how hormone optimization, getting hormone levels that are not too high and not too low, but they're just right, can really transform your life in a lot of ways. So I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of those types of things in the interview, but that's the basics of where I come from.
Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. Okay, so where are you from? Are you married? Do you have kids? What are your hobbies?
I've been married to my wife, Mary, for 37 years, coming up on 37 years this year. And we have one son. We live in Salt Lake City. Our son is grown. He lives in Tennessee right now. And I don't have any grandkids yet. We do have a dog, but we live kind of the empty nester lifestyle and have a little bit of freedom that way, which is kind of nice. But we've been in Salt Lake City for the vast majority of the time of our lives. My wife is originally from California. I'm originally sort of from Utah, sort of from all over the place. Okay. But we love living in the West. It's a great place.
Gotcha. So what are your hobbies? Do you have any hobbies?
Well, I do have one main hobby. I actually work at churches, and I'm a sound engineer. And so I do live sound for bands. I'm actually doing it 3 times this week. And so I set up all the microphones and set up all the speakers and the soundboard, and I help the band sound good, and I also help them to feel comfortable so they can hear themselves. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. I really love. I kind of have a part-time job doing that, but it's also something that, so I passed it on to my son, who is actually a recording engineer, and he has a recording studio in his home, and he's a musician, which I'm not. My wife is a musician, and so it kind of is all in the family, this whole sound and recording and music and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely in our blood, in our family. So I have 2 things I'm passionate about. One is hormones, and the other is sound.
Awesome sauce. I love it. Well, I'll maybe tapping you to help me when I'm ready to upgrade my sound equipment as I progress in this podcasting and vlogging world here.
I'd love to do that.
Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. Now you mentioned a church. Are you a Christian as well?
I am. Yes, I'm a believer. I go to I actually go to a couple of different evangelical churches here in Salt Lake City, and my wife is actually on staff at a church. She's a worship leader and kind of a part-time, kind of a spiritual direction type of thing in a small church here in Salt Lake City.
Awesome sauce. I'm a believer as well, so I love it. No wonder we connect so well. All right. So you talked to us about how you became a pharmacist, a hormone specialist as a pharmacist. Just basically your interactions with your customers coming in and so on and so forth. So now you coined yourself and you made a lane as the hormone pharmacist, right?
Right.
All right. So with that, talk about compound pharmacy, right? How is that different from traditional pharmacies?
Well, compounding pharmacy is based on the idea that something that just comes off the shelf, kind of one size fits all, is not really the best solution for a lot of people. Now, maybe for the majority of people, one size fits all is fine, and they need a particular drug, and there's a 5 milligram, 10 milligram, 20 milligram, and so the doctor chooses a 10 milligram and it works fine. So in a lot of cases, that's okay. But especially when it comes to hormones and many other medications, there may be some nuances where a 5, 10, and 20 milligram dose is not really going to work. Maybe a person needs a 35 milligram dose, or maybe they need a 14 milligram dose. There can be some subtle differences in patients. And there's a there's really a movement in the profession of pharmacy all about customizing people's prescriptions. And that's what compounding pharmacy is all about. Compounding pharmacy is about adjusting both the dose that a person might need, but also the dosage form. So, for example, a woman might need a hormone, but she can't take it orally for some reason. So she needs to take it in a cream that's placed on the surface of the skin, or she needs to take it in a vaginal troche or a vaginal suppository, or there may be one example is a sublingual dosage form, a dosage that's put underneath your tongue and dissolved. Big Pharma doesn't have the capability to offer multiple different dosage forms and multiple different doses. So compounding pharmacy has the ability to really be light on our feet and really offer patients alternatives that might be specific for that person, where a big pharma or a large pharmaceutical manufacturer just doesn't have the capability to do that. And as I mentioned, it's not for everybody, but it can be for a significant number of patients, something that really works to get them the type of medication and the medication dose and the dosage form that really works for their particular situation. Awesome. Adults, children, men, women, animals. Compounding pharmacy has been around since long before Rite Aid and Walgreens existed. If you were to look at pharmacy in like 1750, the pharmacy in 1750 was based 100% on compounding. The prescription, the word prescription actually comes from the Latin word recipe. And a doctor would write out a prescription, or in essence, he would write a recipe that says, take these 6 ingredients and mix them together and give them to the patient. And that's where pharmacy originally came from, is compounding things specifically for a patient based on a doctor's prescription. So that's a long story, but essentially that's where compounding pharmacy comes from.
Awesome. And there's so much to unpack with that. First of all, let me give the listeners, the viewers, some backstory, some insight on how I came to meet Mr. Goldberg, right? Goldring, I'm sorry. Goldring, forgive me, Mr. Goldring. In my perimenopausal journey, I've been, looking here and there and everywhere, and I came across him. And so I reached out to him and set up a coaching call last week, and it was fantastic. He gave me a lot of insight. And to give you some insight on what he's saying about the compounding pharmacy and how it can help certain people, and me taking hormone replacement therapy, right now I'm taking progesterone, estrogen, and it seemed like progesterone wasn't doing what, it wasn't agreeing with me, it seemed. So long story short, he suggested compounding. And so I spoke with my physician, and there's a prescription with a lower dose of progesterone, because right now the big pharma progesterone only has 100 milligrams available. Prometrium, is that it?
Right. That's the brand. And there's a generic available too, but they're both only available in 100 milligrams.
Correct. And they are the that is the bioidentical version of progesterone. It is not a progestin, as your course distinguishes, and we'll get into that in a second. But so anyway, it's only 100 milligrams, and I was taking it, and it just seemed to bring more of a low and a depressive type mood. So he thought that maybe I should get it a lower dose, and the only way that I could do that was through compounding. And so I'm going to experiment with that as well. So
that's a classic example where big pharma has one size, 100 milligrams. You could take 100 milligrams or you could take 200 milligrams. But in that particular case, Prometrium or the generic progesterone capsules, they're always made in oil-filled capsules. Now, theoretically, you could cut that oil-filled capsule in half somehow. I've actually tried it before. You get oil all over your hands, spraying everywhere. It cannot be done. Literally, that is something that cannot be done unless, I suppose, you could have some kind of specialized equipment and cut this capsule open and weigh out the oil and divide it into 2 parts. It would take you an hour to do 1 capsule. So it's just not going to happen. Right. But a compounding pharmacy can take that active ingredient, the progesterone, and make you a capsule that's 50 milligrams or 25 milligrams, or maybe for some people, they need to 10 milligram
Mm-hmm.
that big pharma can't do. It just
Mm-hmm.
is impossible. So have you had an opportunity to try that lower dose progesterone yet? Or
Not yet. I have to get to the pharmacy to pick it up.
Okay,
And later on, I'm going to tell you, because I'm still experimenting with this progesterone. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because it may not, that's one thing about this whole thing with hormones, as you will see from Mr. Goldring, is it's an experiment. You have to kind of try until you get it just right. Right. So we'll get into that later on down in the discussion here, but while we're on compounding pharmacy, talk about the pushback and the narratives around compounding pharmacy, right? Because you said something very key about big pharma. They only have kind of one size fits all, or they'll have 500 milligram dose, 100 milligram dose, you know what I mean? Talk about the regulations and the reliability of compound pharmacy.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I actually have made some videos on my YouTube channel that are all about this particular topic. Really, there is a lot of animosity between the FDA on one hand and compounding pharmacy on the other. Here's what we need to recognize: the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration is a branch of the federal government, and their job is to regulate prescription drugs. And so it kind of would make some sense that they would want to regulate compounding pharmacy. Mm-hmm. Now, compounding pharmacy, as I mentioned, has been around for hundreds of years. Before the FDA was ever even imagined, compounding pharmacy existed in the United States, like I say, in the 1700s.
Right.
And for a long time, for probably at least 100 years, compounding pharmacy has been regulated. It is definitely regulated. I can tell you, I actually... I quit compounding pharmacy because of the regulations. They were overwhelming. The burden of regulations was killing me. I was getting really stressed out by the regulations. So when people say compounding pharmacy is not regulated, that is a crock. It is completely wrong. I know about it because I was a compounding pharmacist and I quit. The regulations, however, are different than the FDA. Your doctor is not regulated by the FDA. The FDA has no authority. And there was a recent court case that told the FDA they were posting some things on social media that were overstepping their bounds and really getting into the realm of what doctors are doing and telling people not to use certain drugs. But the court case said the FDA does not have the authority to do that. In fact, the doctors that prescribe hormones or whatever drugs are regulated by the state board of medicine in every state. Correct. So you live in North Carolina, I live in Utah. Your doctor is regulated by the North Carolina State Board of Medicine. My doctor is regulated by the Utah State Board of Medicine. They are not. Neither one is regulated by the FDA. And exactly the same thing happens with compounding pharmacy. They're not regulated by the FDA. They're regulated by the State Board of Pharmacy. And sure, are they different from different states? They are. And they're sometimes, I can tell you, the pharmacy that I worked at, we had licenses in 50 different states. It was a bit of a pain in the butt to meet all of those different requirements, but we did it. It's possible to do. And they're not that much different. Some of them have different requirements and different little things that they ask you to do or make you do. But the bottom line is compounding pharmacy is regulated. It's regulated by the state, not by the federal government. And that has its pluses and minuses, but it's not unregulated is the bottom line.
Correct. And so the advantage of, I guess, again, when we get into these government three-letter agencies, the overreach, it just sounds like another overreach type situation. And because compounding pharmacy is just kind of serves to disrupt a little bit of the big pharma thing. And so it's to their advantage to kind of push back, I guess.
Yeah, one thing that we need to recognize, and this is extremely well documented, the financial revenue for the Food and Drug Administration is somewhere around 40 to 50% from Big Pharma. That comes from fees that Big Pharma pays to get their drugs approved. And so the FDA is like, are we on the side of big pharma? Absolutely. And compounding pharmacy is not on the side of big pharma, because big pharma doesn't like the idea that somebody else is going to make a drug that is specific for an individual patient. And so the FDA and big pharma are very much opposed to compounding pharmacy in a number of different ways. And there is absolutely an incentive for the FDA to really promote big pharma and put down compounding pharmacy, in my opinion. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's very well known that the FDA is funded by big pharma fees. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out.
Well, let me give you another anecdote here relative to my quest. After you said, hey, find a compounding pharmacy, you gave me the particular accreditations to look for. So I called around town and asking, hey, are you accredited? Do you have these accreditations, so on and so forth? I'm looking to have my progesterone compounded, blah, blah, blah. And so I called 3, and one of them responded back basically saying that they did not, because of some sort of new regulation around. It was like 800 something. If you give me a second, I'll look it up what they sent me.
Yeah, it's called USP 800 is the name of it.
Yes.
United States Pharmacopoeia, and there's a whole bunch of new rules about compounding pharmacies, and they're very difficult to meet.
And this pharmacy said, we're not doing it because of this new regulation, but this pharmacy down the street does it. You know what I mean? So. Yep. That's, again, to your point.
Well, and not only have I quit compounding pharmacy, but a lot of pharmacies are quitting compounding pharmacy because of the regulations. So It's just more proof that there's a ton of regulation, and it's a burden for a lot of pharmacies. Now, I'm not saying that regulation is a bad thing. Regulation is good, and we need to make sure that pharmacies are accountable. But there's a big question mark as to what system they need to be in for accountability. And what I recommend is looking for, as I mentioned to you, an accredited compounding pharmacy. An accreditation is a form of accountability where pharmacies voluntarily go through a whole bunch of steps. And it is it is a big burden, because I did those steps myself. Mm-hmm. I was the lead compounding pharmacist in a very large nationwide compounding pharmacy. And we did all of those steps, and it's a pain. But it's important for patients to really understand that the quality of compounding pharmacy is really based on these accountability steps that we took.
But even absent of that, as you said, it is regulated by the state. So yes. if it does not have the accreditation, it's still no need to panic about it.
Absolutely.
Right?
I totally agree with that. Now, the added layer of accreditation is even more protection to make sure that it's a quality compounded prescription that you're going to receive.
Right.
But I totally agree that you can trust compounding pharmacies, even if they're not accredited, because they have to go through the rules of the state.
Mm-hmm. And not to veer off too much, but again, to just affirm what you're saying about government overreach through some of these 3-letter agencies. What you're describing is also going on with the SEC overreaching and burdening cryptocurrency innovators in the country, and basically pushing them out of the marketplace in the interest of the big banks that our government is in bed with. And so there's that fight there, because it's a lot. I'm not going to say that, but I'm just letting you know, no one's a conspiracy theorist. These things are documented. And so forth. Okay, so let's move on here. Perimenopause and menopause is usually associated with hot flashes, right? That's typically what women are complaining about. But there are some unconventional or uncommon symptoms that women wouldn't normally associate with menopause. And I am a poster girl of that. As I was telling you in our coaching call, I feel like now I know, since I started the estrogen and then the light bulbs came on, since over 10 years, I think I've been in perimenopause. And the sorts of symptoms that I was receiving, I've not been having like unbearable hot flashes, but cognitive challenges, anxiety out of the wazoo. And then as of late, being diagnosed with prediabetes, insulin resistance, GERD. All of these happen in my 40s. So talk to us about the uncommon symptoms and things that are associated.
Well, the thing to remember about perimenopause and menopause, those are a continuum, right? So in perimenopause, and I talk a little bit about this in my course, which we'll talk about later, but we have this fluctuation of all your hormones, and they're all over the place in perimenopause. And sometimes a lot of doctors choose not to test hormones during menopause because they may be really high one day and really low the next. But there's this hormonal upheaval during perimenopause, and then it really settles down at menopause. But the key to remember is hormones basically control everything in your body. Now, you've mentioned a couple of hormones. You've mentioned estradiol and progesterone. There are a number of others, including testosterone and DHEA. You've mentioned insulin as a hormone that's impacted by other hormones. Mm-hmm. There's also thyroid hormones. So this whole soup of multiple hormones, there may be 10 primary hormones that we need to be concerned about. Cortisol is another one, the stress hormone that when we're anxious, we tend to, your mind is going thinking about a million things at a time. That's an indication of high levels of cortisol. But all of these hormones affect basically every system of your body. And so the fact that those hormones are out of whack, whether some of them are too high and some of them are too low, that makes things really difficult. And it leads to, there's a ton of other symptoms that I've literally heard from, I tried to count it up the other day, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 women. And I get about a dozen emails a week from women who say they're desperate and they're having so much problems with menopause or perimenopause symptoms. They just need help. And I like to say that women like reach out and grab me by the collar and say, please help me, please. That's the way I experience it, is just a desperation for help because of all these symptoms. The fact that there could be 20, 30, 40, 60 different symptoms. My wife has a really good friend. She goes to the gym with her. And this friend has very bad joint pain because of menopause.
Yes.
Her joints and muscles are just like sometimes debilitating because and that is related to a loss of estradiol. It's one symptom that a lot of people don't think about. Intestinal symptoms, constipation, diarrhea, nausea. A lot of gastrointestinal symptoms might be related to menopausal hormone changes or perimenopause hormone changes. And when we, what I like to call, optimize those hormones, we can find that a lot of those symptoms are relieved, and we can make a big difference.
I was, I spent a lot of time going to doctors and things, and I would say, based on what I'm learning now and some of the symptom relief that I am getting from introducing the HRT, including the alleviation of joint pain, because I was having that same thing as well. And I had a friend, she's also on it, and we're noticing that we're not as creaky, and when I have gone a couple of days, in my experimentation, and I'll get off of the estrogen, I notice that I'm a little more achy than normal, right? Which brings us to the next segment here, right? When you talked about optimization, how can we know what the range of optimization is? And again, I wanted to share my blood work, and right, to just give the viewers and the audience a real world example here. So let's take a look. All right, so you there?
I am.
Okay, so what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to go through my blood results here. I had this done on September the 25th of 2023. That's when I started hormone replacement therapy. I actually started it on my birthday, 9/29.
And happy birthday present.
Right. Exactly. Getting on HRT was a birthday present to myself, so I could start feeling better. So anyway, so I went to a specialist, and these were my results. So talk to me about what you see here. Because
I can see a couple things right off the bat. First of all, it says your estradiol is less than 5. Now, it also shows the normal ranges on the right side of that lab page. And it says the follicular phase. The follicular phase is the first half of the menstrual cycle. And the normal range for the follicular phase is 12.5 up to 166. Okay. And then what happens is the ovulation phase, which is around day 14 of the menstrual cycle, the estradiol goes up quite a bit, and it goes at the low end 85 up to 500 basically. And then the luteal phase, it kind of goes back down a little bit. It's similar to the earlier one, but it says postmenopausal is less than 6, and here you are less than 5. So that's an indication that you're probably pretty close. If you're not in menopause, you're very, very close to being in menopause because your level is so low. And now, if you look at the postmenopausal range, it actually goes up to 54. So some women do make estrogen during menopause, just not nearly as much as they used to. And I would say that 54 level is pretty unusual. It would be occasionally someone to be that high. Most of the time, women in menopause are around 2% of the estrogen that they made before they went into menopause. So it's such a small, low level. And the level that's showing here, less than 5, that level is just not enough to do basically anything. There might be a little bit, some estrogens made by skin cells, some estrogens made by the adrenal glands, and it's made by fat cells. But as I mentioned, it's just a tiny, tiny amount, and it's nowhere near enough to make any difference. Now, for a lot of women, when your estrogen gets that low, you're going to start getting hot flashes. And that's the most common and most bothersome symptom. But as you've mentioned, Latisha, you didn't have those. They weren't that big of a deal. So
I had them, but they were not, they weren't unbearable.
Right. A lot of people are just not that sensitive to them. But it's that low estradiol that leads to those. And the fact that you have less than 5 means you're going to have a lot of the classic menopause symptoms that are related to low estradiol. Now, when we look at progesterone, your progesterone is 0.6. And if you look at the ranges on the right side, it goes from 0.1 up to 0.9 and 1.8 up to 23. The target that I'm looking at for progesterone would be like 10. Because when you look at those numbers, like kind of averaging them out from the low to the high, average them out, it's probably somewhere around 10 would be kind of in the middle. And that would be a nice place to shoot for. But at 0.6, you have the exact same problem as with the estradiol. It's so low, it's not going to do anything. It's just, it's basically non-existent. Practically, there may be some there, but there's very, very little. And that's to be expected. Now, one thing I'll point out about progesterone is progesterone really comes into play when you're ovulating every month. When you ovulate, there's a piece of tissue left over called the corpus luteum. And I explained this a little bit in my course, but that's what produces progesterone. And so as you go in through perimenopause, you stop ovulating every month. And so you're losing the ability to have a baby. And that when you stop ovulating, that by definition kind of drops down your progesterone. It doesn't necessarily go to 0, but it drops way down because ovulation is definitely tied into progesterone production. So just right there, I can see you're very likely to have some hot flashes. You're likely to have some weight gain. You're likely to have some brain fog. You're likely to have some trouble sleeping. Progesterone is very much involved with sleeping. And when your progesterone goes really low, you might have trouble sleeping. You might have troubles with anxiety and depression. There's a bunch of symptoms that are definitely tied to those two being very low. And so I would expect a lot of those symptoms. And then any symptoms that you tell me about, I can probably tie those back to those low levels of both estradiol and progesterone.
Yeah, and I forgot to say the main one is the weight gain. I have this belly, this spare tire around my back that I can't seemingly get rid of, and that's a part of your course as well. That I'm actually starting that part, so I can't wait to get through that to see what your suggestions are for there. But just to make things a bit clear for the viewers, when you talked about ideal progesterone and wanting it to go to 10. So in other words, if you were my doctor, for example, and I came to you with those results, you put me on HRT, and then I'd be on it for maybe 3 months, 6 months or something like that. And then we retest again, and you would want to see a postmenopausal lady's, her progesterone at around 10.
Yeah, that's a ballpark, and
Mm-hmm.
that's based on the idea that you have a certain level when you're of childbearing age, when you were 35, let's say. And so
Yeah.
we're trying to target those levels roughly. Now, I didn't mention the target level for estradiol. Generally, my target for estradiol is about 100, and I have a particular graph that I kind of show. That I don't have it with me, but I'll send you a copy of it. So maybe
Yeah.
you can
Of
include it
course.
in the notes. But basically, I have a graph that shows the ups and downs that happen during the childbearing years. And if you kind of look at the ups and downs and kind of take an average, the average during childbearing years is around 100. It goes way higher than that, and it goes a little
Right.
bit lower than that. But the average is somewhere around 100. So that's kind of what we're shooting for estradiol. There are some, I would say, practical difficulties. Like some women get breast tenderness when we get up to 100, and so if we get up to 60, we're okay. That's an all right level. 60 or 70. If we're down at 20, 30, 40, it's just not enough to really help. So we try to get at least 60, optimally 100, but 60 would be okay too. And then progesterone, we're shooting for about 10-ish roughly. And
Mm-hmm.
this is based on blood levels. This is something I want to
Right.
point out. A lot of doctors will use saliva testing or urine testing, which they have their value, but there's a lot more evidence behind blood testing than there is for saliva and urine testing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some for those other types of testing. I'm not as big of a fan of saliva and urine testing. I have a doctor friend of mine who's a menopause expert, and he swears by something called a 24-hour urine test, and he knows how to use it, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But for most doctors, a blood test is the thing that's the most established in the medical literature, and so that's kind of the one that I rely on the most, and that's exactly what this lab test is based on: is your blood estradiol and your blood progesterone, and so
Cool.
that's kind of the one that I gravitate toward. I'm not saying that those other ones are wrong. I'm saying that in general, there's stronger evidence for blood tests.
Right. And again, that's why I'm talking to you, because I am interested in things that are verifiable and that are most credible. And as you say, those things aren't, not so per se credible, but this is the most. I mean, this is the most credible. And
Right.
so why would I want anything else? And to that point, there is some sort of, just to educate the viewers, there is some sort of test. I think it starts with a H. I can't remember it. Here I am with the brain fog. It's some sort of hormonal testing. It's this huge system that many people go by. It's typically done by people that aren't medical doctors or don't have a medical background, but more so kind of like the naturopaths and things like
Are
that.
are you thinking about the Dutch test?
Yes, the Dutch test.
Okay,
Tell me
Dutch.
about this, because women may be hear about the Dutch test and related is how reliable is that compared to blood?
Okay, so I'll give you a little story. So the Dutch test is called Dutch. DUTCH stands for the dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. Dutch,
Mm-hmm.
and Dutch is uh, obviously it has to do with dried urine.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the name. It was developed by a biochemist. His name is Mark Newman, and his lab is in McMinnville, Oregon. I used to live in a town called Sherwood, Oregon, which is about 20 minutes away from McMinnville. And probably 8 years ago, I called up Mark and said, "Hey, I'd love to come visit your lab and talk to you about your test, the Dutch test." And so I went out to the lab and got a thorough tour, and we talked for an hour about all of the stuff that he's doing. I find the Dutch test really fascinating. It has a lot of utility, it has a lot of interesting things. I personally don't know that the Dutch test is the best test to use like on a regular basis for most people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit more expensive than some of the blood tests would be. It offers some things that blood tests don't offer, especially in terms of what we call metabolism. Metabolism is the way your body breaks down things, especially hormones. And so he has a fascinating look at the way estrogen is broken down in your body. And estrogen is broken down through a number of different what are called biochemical pathways. And he has a way to test that. And it's fascinating and it's really interesting. He also tests a lot of the breakdown of progesterone. He doesn't measure progesterone in the urine because progesterone isn't found in the urine. He measures metabolites or breakdown products of progesterone. So the bottom line is I find Dutch testing to be very useful, very interesting, but it's really more for those cases where we can't figure out what's going on. I think I've mentioned to you that sometimes hormone replacement therapy becomes a little bit more art than science. And there's some subtleties that kind of need to be figured out. And that's where it's really helpful to have a doctor, a hormone specialist who really knows what they're doing with hormones. And sometimes the tool that they may use to be able to figure out what's going on with hormones is the Dutch test. Now, as I say, it's probably a smaller percentage of patients who need that type of thing, but it is a tool in the toolbox. Where overall, I would say the most useful, widely used tool would be the blood test for estradiol, progesterone, and whatever other hormones, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay, so just to recap, here's my blood results, and this is what it was almost 6 months ago, back in September of 2023. And so I have been, experimenting with HRT since that point, and probably I'll go, maybe in the summer or maybe around June and have my levels checked again to see where I'm at. And then I can see what's most effective and so on and so forth. Tell me about this testosterone here. You see my testosterone levels, and you see a lot of women talking about that as we enter perimenopause. Does the testosterone deplete in the same way as estrogen and progesterone?
Yes and no. Testosterone does deplete and it goes down in menopause, but what happens in menopause? So in perimenopause, as I mentioned, your hormone levels tend to go up and down and up and down and up and down. And then after you go into menopause, they basically drop off, and you basically go immediately within a couple of months to a 0 level, or to, like your levels are less than 5 and 0.6 or something. So low they're not going to make any difference. Testosterone doesn't usually work that way. Testosterone kind of goes down a little bit more gradually. And so what we find is sometimes women have higher levels of testosterone even a couple of years into menopause, but they're going to tend to go down. And this is what happens with men. Men lose their testosterone over a period of about 10 years. And it starts to decline in their 30s and kind of gradually goes down until they're 50, 55. And then it's below the level that's really helpful. And kind of the same thing happens with women. It's maybe a little shorter time period, but the same thing. It's kind of more gradual. And so what they'll find is after a few years, their testosterone level is very low. And that has an impact on a few different symptoms. The first thing we think of with testosterone is we think it has to do with sex drive or libido. And that's definitely part of the whole thing with sex drive and libido. I like to really remind people that sex drive and libido are complex, and that testosterone is only one element. Maybe you're in a relationship where you're struggling with your husband, or you're just not getting along very well, and that can have an impact on whether you want to be together physically.
Correct.
Maybe you have other physical issues that are like, for example, menopause issues like vaginal dryness. Maybe sex is painful. Maybe there's some irritability and some depression and some mood swings, and you're not sleeping very well. All of those things.
Or thyroid issues.
Thyroid actually can have a direct effect on your sex drive. And so all of those things combine to have an impact on your sex drive. It's not just testosterone, but testosterone is a big part of it. So we have to kind of look at the big picture, which is another reason why I always recommend we take a look at all your hormones, not just one or two of them. And that's one of those
Speaking of,
one of those things that if you talk to your primary care physician or your OBGYN, they may look at one or two hormones. They're not necessarily going to look at the big picture and see all of them. Okay, so libido is the one thing we think about with testosterone that it can have an impact on. Number two, though, is muscle strength and muscle stamina. That when we work out or we go for a walk or we go for a run or we do some type of exercise, testosterone makes a big difference in how our muscles respond to that exercise. Testosterone is, we've heard the term anabolic steroids. Well, testosterone is literally an anabolic steroid, and anabolism is the process of building muscle. Anabolism is a hugely important thing. Your body does two types of building, or it does anabolism, which is building muscle. The other thing is catabolism, which is tearing things down. And that's what we don't want, is things to tear down. But testosterone helps us to build up. And so that's a hugely important thing, especially as we get older. I'll give a little personal story. My parents are in their 80s and they are getting very physically weak. And it has a lot to do with their testosterone and their loss of muscle. That is an extremely common problem among older people. You see a person at the grocery store with a walker or a cane, and they're wobbly and they look like they're going to fall down because they don't have enough muscle. And that is a big issue with the loss of testosterone. Now, testosterone is not the only thing, but it's a major contributor to the loss of muscle. Testosterone also contributes to the strengthening of your bones. As you get older in menopause, you'll eventually start going into osteoporosis if you don't adjust your hormones, and testosterone is a big factor for that. Testosterone and estradiol can help you keep your bones solid. So it's helpful for both bone and muscle strength, which you really need to keep. My mom is 83 and she fell a year ago and broke her hip because she has osteoporosis. My dad has osteoporosis too. And they're both in danger of falling and breaking a hip. Now, here's an interesting thing. If you break a hip, you think, oh, well, I'll just have surgery and get it fixed. 30% of older people, when they break a hip, they end up dying from some complication. They end up at the hospital. They end up in a rehab facility. They get pneumonia. They get all kinds of different things. 30% die after a broken hip. Broken hips are extremely dangerous. And testosterone and estradiol make a huge difference in whether you get them in the first place.
Gotcha. So looking at this testosterone result, first of all, is this unique to just women? For example, would like the reference range here is 4 to 50. Does this also apply to men, or is this, just women because they knew that I was a woman? And so they're looking at a reference range for women, or is this a reference range for both men and women?
No, that's just for women. And most of the time, those reference ranges are adjusted for age. And so that is probably based on, your age at the time.
Right.
And they take that range and lower it down because women of your age generally have a low level. And that is definitely a female range. Now, the range for women is somewhere in that neighborhood. The range for men would be something like 300 to 1,000 or 300 to 900. So a lot higher than the range for women. Now, I also want to point out, this is something called total testosterone. It doesn't say that on there, but I guarantee that this is total testosterone. There is another measure of testosterone that's called free testosterone. So your total testosterone is 13, and your free testosterone is some smaller percentage of that is available to use for your cells. And your doctor hasn't tested for that, but that's probably the most important one to look at, because that's the one that makes the most impact on how you feel and on your symptoms and on your bone health and that kind of thing. So the free testosterone, this is something that a lot of like your primary care physician and your OBGYN might test your testosterone. Most of them probably won't even test it. But if they do, they'll just test your total testosterone, and they won't necessarily look at your free testosterone, which is really the important one to look at. And it has to do with the fact that not all of your testosterone is available for your cells to use.
So you would, okay. So I'll definitely ask for that the next time. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that the entire picture of hormones, not just a select one. So here in my blood work, they tested my TH, and for example, free TH. I guess that's similar to what free testosterone would measure. Here's my free T3. It was a little low here because I was fasting that day, and I understand that can make it go low, but it's back normal now. But long story short, relative to the overall picture to make a diagnosis, you have something to say?
So it took me a little bit longer to take a look at your thyroid levels. So
Oh,
I will talk a little bit about 3 different things in relation to thyroid. One
okay.
is TSH. So TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. That hormone is your body saying, hey, we need to make more thyroid. That's basically what the job of TSH is all about. TSH itself doesn't actually do anything other than call for more thyroid up here. Now your level is 1.3, and it says the reference interval is 0.45 up to 4.5.
Yes.
So you're down towards the lower level, which
Yeah.
means that your body isn't shouting really loud for thyroid. But TSH is one thing to look at. It's important. It's not something to get freaked out about whether it's high or low. If it gets really high, that means you're dangerously low on thyroid. If it gets really low, that's not something to be so concerned about. Now, this T4, are you taking a thyroid medication?
I'm not.
Okay. The most common thyroid medication is something called levothyroxine,
Yes.
which is T4. It's
Yeah.
a particular type of thyroid called T4. And this measurement, you're at the kind of medium high range. So that's okay. Your T4 level is okay. But if you scroll down, we can take a look at your free T3, which is down a
Yeah.
little bit lower. And
Yeah.
you're at 1.7. The range is 2 to 4. And so at this point in time, you're pretty low on your T3. A lot
Yeah.
of doctors won't give you T3 and won't replace your T3, which, from my professional opinion and from many other doctors that I work with, is a mistake. We need to really, that's the one that's the most important. And so here's the thing to remember about T3 and T4. T4 is kind of a storage hormone. It's a place where we store thyroid. It doesn't really work that well. T3 is the active hormone that does the job. It does the heavy lifting in your body. And so that's the one that's really most important. And so the fact that one's really low, I would suspect that you're going to have some hair loss, you're going to have some weight gain, you're going to have some fatigue, you're going to feel really unmotivated and tired all the time. That low level of free T3 is a danger sign. And so that would be something we really need to work on. Now, you said you'd been adjusted on that.
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back and look at my blood work because I did look at that. And then I know that I was fasting, and I did see that, because I was on an extended fast, like a 7-day water fast. Yeah. Yeah. When I took this testing. So I thought it was that. And then I think I did get it retested, and it was kind of back in the normal range, but I don't think it was optimal. Right.
Right.
And as I mentioned to you, I had that little bald spot I was telling you about, remember? And also my hair has been thinning, right? A lot. And I was losing a lot of hair in like 2022 one time. And so what it says, the previous result was in 2022 was
it was a little higher, 2.9.
Yeah. And so yes, that may have not been the reason why my hair fell out in 2022 then, because it was higher.
In general, what I would recommend you shoot for is maybe closer up to the 4.4 in that reference interval. And you're definitely not anywhere close at 1.7 or even at 2.9. You still have a ways to go. Now, there are some issues if you get way too high of thyroid.
Yeah.
There are some issues where it can cause your heart to race. It can cause some other problems. And so we want to be careful with that. Thyroid is a little tricky, and it's why a lot of doctors are kind of afraid of adjusting your thyroid. But it is important that we get it in an optimal range. And when I say optimal, I mean closer to the high end of the range and not so close. I do a cartoon sometimes that shows this graphic of, you know, from 0 up to high, and a person is like almost at 0, and the doctor says, well, you're at normal, you should be fine.
Exactly.
But you're basically almost at 0. I hear this all the time with testosterone, where men, the low is 300, and this man might have a 305, and the doctor says, oh, you're in the normal range, you're fine. But the difference between 300 and 305 is your body doesn't know the difference. It's still way too low, and you need to be up towards 900.
Correct. Correct. And I hear that the same with vitamin D, right?
Right.
Because for me, you know, the range is like 30 to something. And so I like to try to keep mine, you know, in the 70s, the 80s, or you know what I mean? And
Yep.
because that's more optimal.
I'll tell you a little side note about vitamin D is people regularly post videos and articles about the dangers of vitamin D overdose. There have been some documented cases of vitamin D overdose, and those are almost exclusively people who have taken 50,000 units of vitamin D every day for several weeks.
No.
And so I take 5,000 units. So this would be, if I were to take 10 capsules of my 5,000 units a day, every day for weeks or months, I would get an overdose. You have to take a lot in order to get an overdose. And so all of the cases, I mean, there's some serious problems, but all of the cases are people, it is available in a 50,000 unit capsule, and people have accidentally taken it every day, which is a huge mistake. And that's where that's the only time it happens when people overdose, is when they're taking 10 times the normal dose.
Gotcha. Yeah, I take five IUs once a day.
Perfect.
That's basically it. And I take it with the K2.
Yes, it's excellent. That's excellent for your bones, K2.
Yes. Yeah.
And it helps reduce the risk of heart disease.
Yes. Now, again, speaking of the whole picture of hormones, my menopause specialist at the time basically said she was relying on my FSH numbers, that would really, you know, confirm that I am in menopause and so on and so forth. So these are my FSH and my LH. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I would agree with the FSH, because if you look at the postmenopausal range, it says 25.8 to 134, and all of the other ranges don't even go up to 20.
Correct.
Or they go up to 21 at the highest. So essentially what we look at is if a woman has an FSH of above 40 or 50, it's pretty established that is in itself a diagnosis of menopause. Now they also combine it with when's the last time you had a menstrual period, and so if you have had a menstrual period in the last like 9 months or 10 months, then you're technically not in menopause until you've gone an entire 12 months, 365 days without a period. But the FSH is a confirmation of that, and so those two things are tied together to diagnose menopause for sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so talk to us about how should a person that's in perimenopause, menopause, who are trying to, you know, they're having some troublesome symptoms. They're listening to us now, and they said, "Oh my goodness, that sounds so familiar," and they want to go and talk to their physician. Again, as you mentioned, and as I've experienced also, a lot of the traditional practitioners are reluctant to do blood tests. They're reluctant to have someone on hormone replacement for a lifetime. Like there's so many things that traditional doctors respond to patients that can be discouraging and then, you know, lead the women astray. So how would you advise them to overcome that?
So that opens up a whole interesting thing. I was actually thinking this week I'm going to create a video to talk a little bit about that topic a little bit more. I've had some in the past. It is possible to go to your primary care physician or your OBGYN or your family practice doctor, and they may know enough about hormones that they could help you through perimenopause and menopause. I actually, on some of my videos, I do have something available on my website, and I can send you the link later. I have an HRT questions framework. And this is basically a little 3-question framework that allows you to have open-ended questions to talk with your doctor about hormones. And these questions are designed to not be like pointing a finger and saying, be oppositional, or you don't want to get your doctor on the defensive and have a head-butting fight between you and your doctor. There are ways to ask your doctor, what is your perspective on hormones, and how do you feel about certain things have to do with hormones? And I've kind of worded the questions in a way you can actually take this worksheet, go into your doctor and ask those kinds of questions and get an assessment for yourself. Is your doctor A, willing, and B, able to help you with your hormones? Some can. Frankly, though, a lot of OBGYNs and family practice doctors and general practitioners haven't had the specialty training. They haven't had a lot of training about menopause or about hormones, and they may not feel confident or comfortable. And they may also kind of have this general sense that hormones are dangerous, and so we need to stay away from them. And that is an opinion. I personally disagree entirely. And I think the evidence is firmly in my favor that there is a lot of benefit to optimizing your hormones, not for 2 different reasons. Number one, it helps to relieve or eliminate your symptoms. But number 2, it helps protect you from long-term health risks. So
that's a great segue. That's a great segue to my next question.
The bottom line, though, is in talking to your general practitioner or your OBGYN or your family practice doc, give them a chance and find out if they know about hormones, if they're willing and able to help. But don't be surprised if they're not willing or not able to help you. And so that's where a hormone optimization specialist can come in. And I have a referral system that I can refer people to a hormone optimization specialist through my website. And I'll give you the links to that too. But it's very possible that you may not be able to get any help from your primary care physician. There are lots of reasons for that, which I can explain later. But
as well as your OBGYN, they may, what I've ended up doing, that my OBGYN is open. However, she is one of the ones that wouldn't believe in blood testing. She would push back if I needed to go and get my blood test checked every so often, right? She wouldn't work with me with that. So I have someone who will work with me with that. And I'm having to piecemeal my medical care because, with my GYN, I need to keep my fibroids together, make sure that they're good, and so on and so forth. I'm going to get into all of that. But you mentioned the benefits, right? So what are the benefits?
So I like to say, I've already mentioned this. The one thing that women are very concerned about is symptoms. That's the thing that's knocking on your door right now. That's the thing where your phone is ringing off the hook saying, you got to do something about these symptoms. And I think symptoms are, in a sense, don't say this out loud, but I think they can be a good thing, because what they do is they motivate women to be concerned enough to take some action.
Right.
My mom is, as I mentioned, in her 80s, and she never really had any symptoms. And now she's paying the price for that because it was no big deal. And lots of women they've sailed through menopause without a problem. There's something like 20 to 30% of women who just basically don't even notice any problem during menopause. Oh, it's no big deal. So they don't have their hormones optimized. And so later on, they develop a lot of long-term health risks. And that's the second thing, is optimizing your hormones protects you from multiple long-term health risks. And I will say the most common long-term health risks that are a problem during menopause, and they are a problem for every woman who goes into menopause. Number 1 is osteoporosis. That's the one that comes on the fastest. Within the first 10 years of going into menopause, you will lose bone strength. And if you do nothing, you're very likely to become osteoporotic. And basically it means your bones are brittle. Number 2 is insulin resistance, which can lead to type 2 diabetes. And you've already addressed that a little bit for yourself, it's actually very common among African-American women that insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes are actually more common than they are with women of other races. And so that is a huge problem. And estradiol has a major impact on your susceptibility to insulin resistance. So osteoporosis, insulin resistance, and type 2 diabetes. The third is heart disease. Women up until age 50 have a lower risk of heart disease than men, substantially lower. But between 50 and 60, they catch up. And here's the reason: because they lose their estradiol during menopause. And now by age 60, the rate of heart disease between men and women is the same. And women, it's very clear, and I have a couple of different studies that I've done videos about. It's very clear that the loss of estradiol at menopause is a major risk factor that leads to a greater risk of heart disease. And I'm talking about heart attacks and stroke and eventually heart failure that can happen when you're older. All of these different versions of heart disease are much more likely when you go into menopause because you lose your estradiol, and they're much less likely if you replace your estradiol with the same estradiol. So we have osteoporosis, we have insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, we have heart disease, and then the last one is Alzheimer's disease. As you get to be 75, 80, 90 years old, your chance of Alzheimer's skyrocket. And if you have low estradiol from the time you're 50 up until then, your chances are way higher of getting dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So those four major health risks are greatly reduced if you can optimize your hormones and get them all at just right levels, not too high and not too low. So from my perspective, the symptoms are important. The symptoms are the canary in the coal mine that lets you know there's a big problem here. But the more important thing is the long-term risks. It's very clear that optimizing your hormones, even if you don't live longer, maybe you don't live longer, you're going to live better. You're going to live healthier. You're going to have better muscle strength, better bone strength. You're going to have less heart disease. You're not going to end up in the hospital. You're not going to end up with all of these disease states because you're optimizing your hormones. Now, obviously, you're going to need to take care of yourself. You're going to need to exercise. You're going to need to eat right. You're going to need to stop smoking and all that kind of stuff. But all things being equal, if you take hormones and optimize your hormone levels, you're going to be in much better health. You probably will live longer, but even if you don't, you'll live better for those years. And then what I like to see is a person who lives really, really well all the way until they're 90 years old, and then they die. Instead of they're 50 and they start getting worse and worse and worse and go downhill and downhill, and then they live to be 75 and their life has been terrible for the last 15 years. Right?
I've seen that scenario play out in my own family, and I'm suspecting that my mother, my aunt dealt with a lot of these things because they were not on any hormone replacement therapy, and they were of the age around the time when that WHI study out. And and doctor said no, don't do it. You know what I mean? And my aunt had all sorts of issues with her bones. She ended up dying of a stroke. My mom had heart disease. She had there was a number of other things that took place, but she was not on top of her health. And as a result, by the time she figured out, the pre-diabetes turned into type 2, turned into a stroke, turned into an amputation, all of those things. And 70 and 72 years old, they passed away. And I think, had they been more on top of their health and had some of this information, possibly some differences could have been made. Now to the point of what about women who can't, maybe they have some sort of illness, they may have lupus, or they may have something else, like if hormone replacement therapy may not be for every woman. So what sort of alternatives, what could they do to help?
That's an interesting question. And I hear, maybe not so much in the US, but I kind of follow, especially like social media from the UK. And this is a very common thing that is very much blasted from the rooftops in the UK. And that is that kind of this idea that HRT is not for every woman. And kind of from my reading of it, what I see underlying that is this idea that HRT is not for most women, and there's a large number of women that can't take HRT. From my perspective, I personally believe that there's really only a small number of women who can't take HRT, and it's much smaller than we've been led to believe. And now you've mentioned a couple of possible reasons why women can't take HRT, and that certainly might be the case. And I won't go into all the specific details, but I believe that the vast majority of women could benefit from hormone replacement therapy, and most of them are being told that, well, this is just out of the question because of XYZ. I think we should go into it with the idea that, okay, your body has had full amounts of these hormones all the way up until age 50, and now it has none. Why is that going to be so dangerous to put those back to full amounts again? Now, tell me why that's going to be so dangerous. It's going to increase your risk for heart disease? No, it doesn't. Is it going to increase your risk for breast cancer? Well, we thought it did, but it doesn't really. There's no solid evidence for the vast majority of women that says they really shouldn't be taking hormone replacement therapy. The cases are few and far between of people who should not consider it. Now,
who are some of the? Do you know who should not consider it? Someone that has breast cancer because of the estrogen that. Maybe not even that, huh?
It's an interesting question. So you mentioned women with breast cancer. Definitely women with breast cancer. First of all, no doctor is going to be willing to prescribe hormone replacement therapy for a woman who's going through a breast cancer journey. It's just not going to happen. Even very aggressive hormone replacement doctors, most of them wouldn't touch that situation. However, women who have previously had breast cancer, so this is a really influential book, in my opinion. It's called Estrogen Matters. It's pretty technical. There's a lot of medical stuff in there, but chapter 6 in this book is all about using hormone replacement therapy. It's that chapter is called "Can Breast Cancer Survivors Take Estrogen?" And Dr. Avram Blooming goes into a lot of detail about a clinical trial where he himself was the investigator, and he put women who had already been through breast cancer on hormone replacement therapy, and they had no increase in the recurrence of breast cancer compared to women who didn't take it. So there's a whole lot in this book about that concept of the dangers, the supposed dangers of women who had at one point had breast cancer, but once they get past breast cancer, it's actually possible that they could take hormone replacement. It's not widely accepted, but the scientific basis that he provides in that chapter is just massive. The number of studies, not only American studies, but studies in Australia and in Europe and in Asia and multiple places that have given hormone replacement therapy to women who had survived breast cancer. So I find that quite interesting. I have a hard time finding specific examples of women who should not take hormone replacement therapy. There are a few, but there aren't very many.
Right. So then what would you say about lupus, it being an autoimmune disease?
I don't necessarily think that autoimmune disease precludes women from taking hormone replacement therapy. Now, in any situation where a woman has some health conditions that might cause some issues, that's even more of an incentive for her to see a hormone optimization specialist, somebody who is a real expert. Frankly, there aren't as many of those around as there are family practice doctors.
Right.
The ones that I talk with, I know hundreds of them all over the US, Canada, some in the UK. The ones I talk with are busy because they have a lot of patients who are looking for help. And I am constantly feeding them patients because I have a lot of patients who are looking for help. But I think it's important to find somebody who really knows what they're doing. Somebody who really has some expertise with these unusual situations. Somebody with an unusual health condition.
And for the record, again, it is about experimentation, but to alleviate the fear, right? Because you have to have that optimization specialist who knows what they're doing, but then also the patient has to be willing to experiment. And in that experimentation, there's not that much of a risk. You just simply, if it's not working for you, you get on it for a week or whatever, and whatever the period, you get on, you give it a try, you see how you feel, and then you get off. It's not like you're going to create something catastrophic because these compounds were naturally in your body in the first place.
Right.
Unless I guess they're interacting with some other medication you're on or something like that, perhaps.
There's a lot of theoretical possibilities, which in my professional opinion, just don't really happen that often.
Right.
It's just not that common. And so the idea that HRT is not for everyone, and the subtext is HRT is not for most women, I just don't believe that. And I think we should really look closely at, so what are the very specific situations, and I haven't looked that closely, what are the very specific situations where women should not take hormone replacement therapy? There's just not that many of them.
Right, because the main one is the breast cancer thing, but based on what you're saying, there's new information, challenging that even too.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So relative to the benefits of HRT, and you're mentioning that it's likely helpful for many women, more than many in the traditional space would say, right? There's all this caution around HRT. And you mentioned about, it helps protect against Alzheimer's, osteoporosis. It helps with heart disease, is a preventative against heart disease. What are you basing that on, right? Like how many studies? Because again, we had that WHI that seemed to have been debunked. So where are all of these women who have gone through this, and we know that they took HRT and they didn't get Alzheimer's, they took HRT and they didn't get heart disease? Where are those studies, and where are you gathering that information?
Well, there are a number of different studies. A lot of people, as you mentioned, look at the Women's Health Initiative, which came out in about 2002, and that was looking at a particular set of hormone replacement therapy. And the conclusions that study reached were a little misinterpreted by the media. And this happens all the time. This has actually happened in the last week. A study comes out and the conclusions are just blasted across newspaper headlines and websites to say hormones cause breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read the study carefully, you'll recognize that is not the conclusion that the researchers themselves reached. The conclusion is that, well, there was a slight increase in breast cancer, but it didn't reach what's called statistical significance, which means from a research point of view, it was possibly just by chance that a few more women, and it was such a small number, it was very small. It was 8 additional cases of breast cancer out of 10,000 women.
Mm-hmm.
So there were 38 who got breast cancer with hormones, and there were 30 who got breast cancer without hormones. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a pretty tiny actually the increased breast cancer risk, we call it an absolute risk, was 0.08%. Now, if somebody were to come to you and say, you have a 0.08% increased risk of breast cancer because of, because of taking vitamin C, you would say, who cares? That's such a small thing. 0.08% is nothing. But that's what the study literally said, 0.08% increased risk.
Right.
And it's like, well, we're freaking out about that. But so that's one thing that we look at, is that study. Basically, we can really set a lot of that aside and not really freak out about it. But there are multiple other studies. There's one that I posted a video on. It's called the Danish study. It's called the Danish Osteoporosis Prevention Study, or DOPS. and it used estradiol along with another type of progestin. And basically, it showed that when women were given estradiol fairly early in menopause, they had a lot less heart disease risk than women who were not given estradiol. There's another study called the early versus late intervention trial with estradiol, which it also showed that basically a heart risk marker was reduced when women took estradiol, especially early
Right.
menopause. Now, the studies aren't as strong with Alzheimer's, but there's some evidence that because Alzheimer's is a lot more difficult to test, it comes on a lot longer time period. The studies for osteoporosis are basically a slam dunk. No one disagrees that hormone replacement therapy is absolutely the best treatment and prevention for osteoporosis. Basically, even doctors who don't believe in hormone replacement therapy will reluctantly agree, yeah, well, estradiol is really the best thing for hormone replacement therapy. We just don't like it. That's what they'll say. So there are a lot of studies, and I have a lot of those studies. I try to post those on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in particular aspects of long-term health with optimal hormones, that would be the main place. I do address these quite a bit in my courses. So I want to talk a little bit about the idea of there's a lot of information out on YouTube, and it's all available for free, and I'm happy to give people information for free. And I also have a course available.
Yes.
And here's what happens with a course. When I have a course, what I have is kind of a step-by-step process to kind of help you understand all of the information and kind of help you unfold all of the information. The name of my course is called The Menopause Solution. And kind of the subtitle is HRT right for my menopause or not? I'm trying to help you answer that one simple question. Should you take hormone replacement therapy for your menopause or not? And so I am helping you in a step-by-step way understand all of the things that you need to know to make that decision. And that's what my course is all about. Now, I have a lot of information on my YouTube channel, but it's a little bit here, and a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And, you can maybe piece some of that together. But in my course, I've already pieced it together for you. And I kind of help take you by the hand and walk you through the process. So that's the difference between searching. You can search on Google and try to find stuff, and you can look on YouTube and try to watch things, but you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff, and it's all about organizing that information in a way that can really help you through the process. And that's the difference between a course and trying to do it on your own.
So this is the course, and this is where I am right now, right? So it says resume the course. And so these are the modules that I've taken already, right? What to expect from the course, menopause, what is estrogen, what is progesterone, hormones over a lifetime, what's going on, the weight gain. And this was so informative to me. I can't wait to jump back into this because you were talking about the whole estradiol effect in, weight loss. I mean, in weight gain. And that was one of the, I would say, outside of my cognitive issues, is the other main symptom that I've been having. But just to give you an idea of some of the
I'm going to stop you for just a second, though. Why don't you scroll back up to the top? Okay, so I just wanted to mention that I've kind of built this course around a very simple framework. My framework has 3 different pillars. One pillar is called searches. So when you scroll down here, you can see searches for menopause and what is estrogen and what is progesterone. And if you scroll down further, there are other searches. And basically when I say searches, my question is, what are women actually asking? I call it Dr. Google.
Correct.
Actually asking Dr. Google. Like here's one. Why can't I lose weight in menopause? And so what I've done is I have literally looked at how many times women are searching for particular questions in menopause and about hormones. And what I'm doing is I'm offering the answers to those questions that you won't get on Google. And you won't get them on Google because Google has a lot of advertising. It has a lot of mainstream medical websites like WebMD and Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic and all these different places that have their certain biases. But there's a lot of information that you probably won't get when you do a
Correct.
Google search. And so I'm
Correct.
trying to answer those questions in a way that gives you the real truth that you should be getting. Now, if you look on there somewhere, there's searches about breast cancer. One of the things, breast cancer is searched about 246,000 times a month. It's
Wow.
a big concern. Heart disease in women is searched about 2,400 times a month. Literally, it's like 100 times more than
Right.
breast cancer, searched 100 times more than heart disease. But if you look at the actual impact of heart disease versus breast cancer, heart disease kills 10 times as many women as breast cancer does. So we're afraid of breast cancer, but the thing that kills more women is heart disease. And so
Right.
that's one of the things I want to point out is what are
Right.
people searching for? So that's one aspect, is the searches. The second
Yeah.
aspect is the stories, and you'll see a lot of stories, and there's stories from real women who are sharing their experiences and what's happened to them, whether they've taken hormones or not taken hormones. And then the last is studies, searches, stories, and studies. And so I have a lot of studies, and I've already mentioned a few of those studies. Those are things that I really want to share with people. What does the science actually say? And that's
Right.
kind of my framework that this course is built on: searches, stories, and studies. And all
Exactly.
three of those are designed to help you answer that question: should I take hormone replacement therapy for my menopause symptoms or not?
I tell you, Mr. Steve, you're the winner. Okay, that is why I wanted to speak with you. Okay, I have my story. That's why I wanted to do this video, because I am the Dr. Google girl, right? I'm the one that's searching. Okay, and the fact that you have your stuff is based in science and studies. I'm a frequent reader of medical journals, PubMed, and all of that. So you're speaking my language. And when I want to connect with someone or affiliate with someone, I want them to be people that are about truth and accuracy, right?
Right.
And so there are only two people that I recommend online, right? I know there are many other people, right? But I like how you present this information, and I don't make any qualms about it. I'm biased. I've bought the course, and it is very useful, and it's worth every cent. I even paid for the coaching call, which has brought me value already. And so it is what it is. So I'm very excited about that. Okay, so I think this is going to wrap it up. Like, tell everyone again how to connect with you, connect with your website, your course. Give all of that information, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Okay, so I have a number of different ways to connect with me. I would say the most important is to take a look at my course, and I've given Latisha a special deal for you, and you can kind of take a look at that when you get there. But if you go to my website, simplehormones.com/Latisha, Latisha, simplehormones.com/Latisha, I will set up a special page that allows you to take a look at my course and gives you a little bit of a discount. And we can kind of give you all the details about what that course involves. There also is, it's kind of a limited time offer that I do offer some hormone coaching along with the purchase of the course. I'm not going to be able to do that forever because it takes a lot of my time, but I am offering it right now. So if it depends on when you go to the website, if that's still available. But so that might give you a little sense of urgency to get it now so that you can get the coaching call. Otherwise, you can visit me on my website, simplehormones.com, or you can take a look at my YouTube channel. And if you just look on YouTube and type in Simple Hormones, it'll pull me up. I have close to 100 videos. Probably the majority of those are about menopause and perimenopause. Probably 80% of them are about menopause, and then some about men and some about insulin resistance and about Alzheimer's and other things. But I'll be happy to have you visit any of those sites, and I'd be happy to kind of help you along in your journey and help you answer that question: is hormone replacement therapy right for your menopause or not? And there are lots of other questions along with that, but this is something that I'm absolutely passionate about, and I'm really I have a friend. He's my gregarious German friend, and he's always making fun of me as the menopause guy. He thinks it's so funny that I'm a man and I'm all into menopause. But you know, I'm not making any apologies. And my friend can make fun of me all he wants. It's just who I am, and it's just and a lot of women have told me to my face or to my email, I can't listen to you because you're a man. Oh, that's fine. I mean, if you don't want to listen to a man, that's fine. You know, there are plenty of women who do want to listen to me. But I'm excited to be able to help women in menopause and make a difference. And I hear so many say their lives are transformed when they get their hormones optimized. And that's what really motivates me. That's the thing that makes me, I actually, I'm going to tell you a quick story. My wife and I were in marriage counseling, and we went to our counselor's office. This was 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago today, right now, actually. And we walk out of the counselor's office, and a woman sitting in the lobby points to me and says, "Are you a pharmacist? I listen to your videos and they've been so helpful for me." And I'm like, wow, that feels so good that someone recognized me and they feel like I'm making a difference for them. And so I want to make a difference for you, whether you're in menopause or perimenopause or some other hormone related issue. That's what I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Well, one other thing, let's not forget the men. Do you have any advice for men as they're aging and their testosterone is kind of,
I
testing?
I just made a couple of videos. I made one. I was actually in conversation with a really good friend of mine who wanted to talk about testosterone. And so I made a video that it actually has a picture of these big muscly guys at the gym with no shirt on and a regular guy that looks like me. And it was about testosterone for regular guys, not like jacked gym bros that spend 5 hours a day in the gym. And so I talk a lot about that. It's not as much of my emphasis. Most of my emphasis is about menopause, but I do have quite a few videos that are related to men. And I happen to know a little bit about testosterone for men because I am a man and I've been taking it for a few years. So yes, the answer is yes. I do help men as well. And so another thing I'd like to point out is if you visit my website, I'll give one more link. If you go to simplehormones.com/referral, REFERRAL, simplehormones.com/referral. That's a place where you can request a referral to one of those hormone optimization specialists that I talked about. I have a couple of hundred around the US and Canada. I even have some in the UK, one in Portugal, and some other places. That these are doctors who really know what they're doing, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, people who really understand hormone optimization, who can really help you to make some progress toward hormone optimization. And so I can help connect you with somebody possibly in your area. I can't guarantee that I have somebody in, Poughkeepsie, New York, or Toledo, Ohio, but the chances are pretty good that I might have somebody around somewhere. So it doesn't cost you anything to ask for a referral, but that is one option that I can refer people.
Yeah, and to that point, you can do online consultations, get that information, and then take it to your doctor, because that's what has been helpful with my referring with you, or kind of consulting with you. Getting that information about the compounding pharmacy and possibly reducing the dose instead of just throwing progesterone out the window. Which brings me to my next point, but I'll talk about that later. That's beyond the scope of this. And then one last question. Women, testosterone in women. At what point what number should we be looking to optimize testosterone in women in menopause? Because I hear a lot of that.
To be honest, I need to refresh my numbers on the testosterone for women. I always have to look back and see what my optimal ranges are. I don't have it off the top of my head. I have the ones for estradiol and progesterone pretty well memorized. And I kind of know roughly the ones for men's testosterone, but the one for women, I kind of slips my mind. And so I'd have to look back at that. But there definitely are some levels that we kind of want to target. With testosterone for women, it's a little less on, exact targeting a specific blood level, and kind of a general, we're looking for somewhere in the range. I can't remember what it was, honestly.
Gotcha. Yeah, no problem. Okay, well, cool beans. So, Mr. Steve, I don't know to call you Mr. Steve, Mr. Goldring.
Just call me Steve. That's fine.
All right, Steve. So it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me this information, giving my viewers this information is so helpful. I think this video is going to help so many people. I'm so excited to release it. And God bless you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Latisha, for inviting me. And this has been a blast.
Yes.
So we'll have to do it again sometime.
Awesome sauce.